EV buyers are possibly biting off more they can chew as they go back to gas cars. Over at Icy Cars, we're going to talk about how EVs plunge in value in the used market, and it's getting worse and worse. And remember last month when the United States government put a 100% tariff on imported Chinese EVs? It looks like the European Union is going to be putting their own substantial tariffs on imported Chinese EVs. Guys, grab your snacks and drinks, buckle in. We got a lot of EV stuff to talk about. If you guys are excited for today's content, smash that like button and let's get into the first article here over at Automotive News. More than 40% of United States EV buyers. Now, of course, this is going to change per region, not only in the United States, but it will also change outside of the United States drastically. But 40% plus of US EV buyers want to go back to combustion engine cars, a new study says. And it's no surprise in the United States anyways, why they're doing this, why these buyers who have EVs want to go back. It's charging concerns, all right? Now, especially those charging concerns are much more amplified in colder climates. But when you don't have a reliable charging network built out across the United States, it's just not as convenient. So while you might be able to save money on your fuel, aka electricity, compared to gasoline if you're charging from home anyways. If you're able to save on maintenance, that's one of my least favorite things about cars is their high maintenance. And that's what EVs can sidestep. The problem is if it is so inconvenient to take your car out of town compared to a normal gas car or even a hybrid or plug-in hybrid, if it's so inconvenient, it's just not worth it for a lot of people. 29% of EV owners across the globe said they're likely to reverse course. Okay, I didn't know this data was in here. All right, so we have more than 40% in the United States saying they'll go back to ICE cars, and 29% of EV owners across the globe said they would go back to ICE cars. You got to remember, here in the United States, gas is cheaper here than most places. That's going to also bring people back into ICE. Our charging infrastructure is terrible compared to other countries. All right, so it makes sense why there's a much lower percentage of EV owners outside the United States that want to go back. Oh, and they remind us only 8 stations are operational following the Biden administration's National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program installed 2 years ago. And this thing cost billions of dollars. And what do we have to show for it? Absolutely nothing. Only 23 states have started doling out financing from the $5 billion federal program. Pretty much needs to come from the private sector at this point. And I think this company, Iona, with all these companies right here, joint ventured together to make charging much more convenient here in the United States. Incredibly convenient, they are saying. So I have high hopes for this, much more than the government's ability to do anything at this point in time. And this is not going to require our tax dollars. Here's the thing. So I mentioned how bad the infrastructure is in the United States, but when asked globally, only 9% of the respondents felt the public charging build-out was sufficient for their needs. Interesting. They're saying next generation EV buyers rely on public charging much more than the current generation. Well, let's say most of the EV buyers right now have a home. I would say 99%. But in order to get the EV threshold that the governments are really pushing, you have to get people who are living in condos, have to get people who are living in apartments that don't have access to charging at their home. Okay, so they'd have to charge publicly. Well, here's a couple problems with that. When you charge publicly, the cost of energy skyrockets. Let's say it's 15 cents per kilowatt hour at home, and then when you go to public charge, it's 50 cents or something like that. It's not uncommon, especially like out in California. And so you're pretty much at a wash or even losing money compared to a really efficient hybrid that gets 50 miles per gallon if you have to charge with expensive energy. That's going to be a tough sell for people, honestly. So less convenient and more expensive energy compared to if you were to charge at home. 21% never want to switch to an EV, and only a third of those people cited charging concerns. There's a lot of different reasons why people don't want EVs, but only a third of those people who don't want EVs are saying it's a charging concern. So 2/3 of them are saying they just don't want it for whatever reason. Maybe it's the technology or the safety. They're worried about the batteries blowing up, or maybe they make a political reason out of it, whatever it is.
And I eat all my yogurt.
Go ahead. Go ahead. You can have one chocolate pretzel. Okay, love you. Okay, get back to work.
And you're not that too.
I just said one. All right, and this McKinsey study asked 200 questions to more than 30,000 consumers in 15 countries, which collectively comprise more than 80% of global sales volume. All right, another reason you'd never want to buy EV, you only lease them, is because the used prices are dropping way faster than not only they were in the past, but they're dropping even faster than gas cars. June of 2023 versus May of 2024, used EV prices were pretty high, over $40,000. Let's say $41,000. Now, there's two things contributed in this, I would say. All right, the lack of demand for EVs. All right, so once you lease it and it hits the used market, no one wants to buy it. But also the MSRP, the starting MSRP of new cars have also kept coming down. So you have more incentives. The manufacturers lowering the price of their EVs. That's going to hit used values a lot more. But guys, it's not even leveling out. It still is a sharp fall down. EVs are getting cheaper and cheaper on the used market. So that's good news if you want to buy a used EV. I don't recommend buying a new EV at any cost. Only lease them, because you're going to see a massive depreciation the second the thing rolls off on the lot. That was especially true for cars in the past, but in today's current market with EVs, if you pay cash for an EV, I'm sorry, you just wasted your money. Okay, only lease an EV. $300 a month, you can get a really solid EV lease deal right now. Used prices for gas cars are looking quite strong. What's interesting is that prices for used cars have essentially flatlined. All right, moving on to Europe. EU slaps additional duties of up to 38% on Chinese EVs. Well, I think there's already a 10% tariff on Chinese EVs. And before the US put 100% tariff on Chinese EVs, there's a 25% tariff. Okay, so ours quadrupled. Theirs went up almost quadruple for certain makes. All right, it's not just okay, you make your vehicle in China and it's an EV, 38%. It's not as simple as that. They did investigations, or the EU did investigations in China to figure out which companies were getting the most unfair subsidies from the Chinese government. And depending on which ones got the most help from the Chinese government, they would apply the appropriate increased duties on these imported EVs. So BYD, which we don't get in America, import duties of 17%. Guys, that's nothing. That is absolutely nothing. All right, Geely, 20%, still not that much. Chinese state-owned SAIC would be hit with 38%. I don't think these are going to be that detrimental to these Chinese companies, and here's why. To my understanding, a lot of these Chinese EVs are not that much cheaper than the let's say the European-made EVs at this point in time. You know, these Chinese EVs have been making hand over fist profits before these tariffs come. So they'll be able to lower the price on their vehicles to make up for these tariffs and be able to do so quite a bit. So I don't think this is going to have any effect. Actually, this could have a detrimental effect on the competition the European competition against Chinese EVs. People are saying, hey, this could slow, the adoption rate of Chinese EVs with these imported. I don't think this is actually going to increase the price. I think this is just going to drive down the prices, and they'll skim those profit margins that they've been enjoying. Now, there could be some retaliation on the Chinese end for imported European cars into China. Now, Geely's already thinking about moving the EX30, Volvo, right? Volvo's a Geely company. They're thinking about moving that car as well as the EX90 to production either in Sweden or in Belgium. And that would circumvent the 20% tariff right there. But it still might be far cheaper just to import those models with only a 20% import tax when you have dirt cheap labor and dirt cheap supply chains in China. So it's interesting, and I can't wait to see how this pans out over in Europe. But I think it's kind of a nothing. I was expecting much higher tariffs. I think the EU here was just too scared of the bite back of the Chinese government. So these tariffs are very mild, in my opinion, so that they don't cripple their lifeline, which is selling cars in China. All right. They produce a ton of cars in China. They sell a ton of cars in China, these European automakers, and they didn't want to screw themselves over too much. So they just put a small tariff on these Chinese EVs. Don't think it's going to do much though. Kia EV9 is getting recalled. Well, a lot of you guys would jump to the conclusions. Oh my gosh, is it a battery issue? Does the EV just stop working? And it's a headliner issue. So don't worry about it essentially. And it's not all of them. It's only about 2,000. All right. So not a big deal. But I'm going to end it there, guys. If you enjoyed this content, again, smash the like button. I can't wait to see what you guys have to say down below about our news that we covered today. And if you own an EV, would you be going back to gas cars, or would you consider it? Let me know why or why not. Have a great day and peace out.